So how this is designed, or how I want this to be designed in my brain anyways, is for this to be very interactive and not just a sit and get where you're just listening to this bald guy yapping at you. And so as we get going into this work here today is really about how do we level set just our awareness of AI in general. And I know in this room, there are people that probably know more than me. There are some that have not used it at all. And so the goal here is just if we're going to engage in conversation, we're going to start to formulate opinions and thoughts and perspectives around it. Let's play with it a little bit. Let's explore. Let's actually see what it can and cannot do. And so as we get into some of these more pressing topics that are really, really important to education, and higher ed has some very, very kind of urgent and also long-term strategic thinking around AI and what it means for education and credits and what is learning and what is teaching. We have that foundation. And so in those links, you will see one of those is access to this learning document. This will be as I'm going through the presentation, or you've got time to do some learning and work in your groups, whether that's in breakout groups or in the rooms that you're in, there are resources there. So versus me just coming and talking at you, you can kind of explore. As questions and things emerge in the chat and through the conversations, I will continue to update this. But this here will be where all slide decks will be shared, all resources and the recordings of each of the sessions will eventually be in this learning doc that was shared with you. And here is kind of the general outline of the 3 sessions that Jeremy referenced here. Sessions 2 and 3 will be a little adaptable based on thoughts and ideas of how today goes. So even though I have a plan, it's not locked in stone. If we need to pivot and go different directions, we can, because there's a lot that we could address and there's not unlimited time in this. But today is we're just going to stay focused through ChatGPT and not overwhelm, but start to look at all the stuff. There's so much that's happened. Even when I was there back in October, ChatGPT looks and feels completely different, which means all the other tools do as well. Tomorrow, we're going to start off with a guest. His name is Stefan, and he is really big into the AI world, and he has agreed to come in and share his kind of takes. And he has takes that kind of make your head scratch, and you may or may not like them, but they're important, I think, just to hear other perspectives and voices and people who are doing stuff throughout the world. And then we'll move into looking at some other platforms and then giving you some time just to really maybe dive into some conversations more in your departments, because each department has a different kind of need sometimes. What it looks like, in a writing course may look different than in a CTE type course. And so giving you some time to kind of process what that means for you and the work that you do. And then our last session, I'll also be bringing in another friend of mine who has lots of connections at the higher ed level, in particular with Iowa State, to share some of the stuff that's happening in other universities. I think that's important to kind of hear what are people grappling with at other institutions, and then getting into a little bit of AI media literacy and some of the other top tools that are out. But that's subject to change depending on how sessions 1 and 2 go. So everything will be linked into this document as we get rocking and rolling. As we get into this work today, we're going to be focused with ChatGPT. You can use at your discretion. We'll talk about a few things as we get going. If you're not comfortable having an account, you can partner with someone else. You can go to ChatGPT and actually not create an account. You'll be limited in what it can do, but you can still leverage it if you don't want data and that kind of stuff to be targeted. Or if there's someone in your space or in your breakout room, you can kind of share. People have different feelings on all this. And so by all means, you move at a pace and a cadence that's comfortable to you. Just quickly, I do work at the AEA. My title is STEM lead. And so anymore with all the changes, as you guys know, that other duties as assigned, do a lot of work. I'm in school improvement, STEM, AI, computer science at the state level, some national level, and other states doing a lot of that work. I also help with social studies, our talented and gifted, and some other different departments that we support for our school districts here in this region. So 21 school districts. So a lot of K-12 work, actually heading to Cal Wheat after this presentation to go get them started on AI right after this call. So been doing a lot of this work as we go through, and people are all over the board in what AI means and their background with it. These were the links that I shared with you within the chat there as well. You will be leveraging ChatGPT today as we get going in the learning document. And then there is a separate document for breakout rooms where you'll have an opportunity just to share some of your thoughts. And the idea behind this when we get into it is there's a lot of people on these calls today. So I think it's also important to kind of hear and see the thoughts from other people, but we're not going to do a whole group share out every single time. That would take forever. So we'll just have you kind of capture from time to time some things in a slide deck as we get going. I do know up front, as we're talking AI, you have a million things on your plate. I'm not oblivious to that. And there are other things that you are trying to wrap your head around and figure out. So I know the struggle is real. And so a lot of these these 3 days is to give you time to play and to experiment and to engage in conversation and not be told, hey, here's what you should be doing. Hey, here's how you should be thinking. We just don't have enough time to kind of tinker and grapple with this stuff. There's just too many things on our to-do list. And so something like AI, even if it might be an issue within your work or you're curious about it, you just may not have time. And so I really want to be intentional in giving you that space. Regardless of what our thoughts are, I hope that you continue to be curious and seek some synergies and share your expertise where it applies and where it comes through. And so a lot of people have lots of thoughts on AI, just as we are all allowed to have. And so being willing to lean into maybe some other thoughts that come through that might challenge. Doesn't mean you have to agree with them, but at least be willing to like process what that means. And as I share in all AI presentations, I don't have all the answers. I am not an expert. I follow it. I love it. I read about it. I process. I write about it. But my goal really is to leave you with more questions than answers because the landscape changes so fast. I mean, even I woke up this morning and ChatGPT had launched a new feature while I was sleeping. And so it's a constant like, holy cow, what does this mean? What's this mean for my thinking and my philosophy and things of that nature? I have this in the learning doc, and I'm not going to read the passage, but it's a book I've been reading called Orbital, which is a fantastic read if you haven't read it and you like space and fiction. But capture the page 8 into the learning doc if you want to process this. And I think it's an important piece because I think this is where a lot of us are grappling with. In this passage, the person is explaining how he was in an art class and he was trying to process this painting here that's on the right side. And what does it mean? You know, are we the focal point? Is it the little girl? Is it the family? Is it the guy in the window? Is this a piece of art that means absolutely nothing? And it's just a picture of a scene. Like this idea of thought. And I think this is where we are in education. How do we help our students learn to continue to think on their own 2 feet and not be so dependent on AI for everything? And how do we leverage this? What's this look like in the learning space? What's this look like in the teaching space? And how do we continue to allow us to have enough foundational knowledge to be able to have our own opinions and perceptions and thoughts and ideas? And I think this is the really hard part because we're seeing on some ends kids relying on, and adults, AI for everything. And so that's not the answer. To completely block and ban AI completely is also not the answer. So where is this happy medium if one does exist? And what does that mean for us in the work that we do? And so when I read this little passage, it just kind of, I think, brought to light a lot of this work that we're doing of what does it mean to be able to grapple with ideas or art or thinking and learning that maybe is gray and doesn't have necessarily a black and white answer. And so my last disclaimer, and then we'll get into the work, is I'm not claiming to be right about any of this stuff. What I'm going to be presenting is just things for you to think about and explore. And if you're like, that's bogus, I don't agree with that, that's perfectly fine. I'm not here to say I am right. This is just here are the things that I've been reading, curating, exploring, navigating with other people, other schools, other districts, and then what does that mean for us? And I will tell you, my thoughts and ideas change all the time. I was reading a different book over the weekend, and it forced me to completely kind of redesign this entire workshop. And I felt really good about what I had before. So I think that idea of being lifelong learners. So let's get into some of this so I don't ramble on too long. I'm not going to spend forever on what's happening globally, but I think it's important before we get into talking about what is AI. There's a lot that's happening at a societal scale that we may or may not be aware of. There was a huge computer consumer electronics show last week that had all sorts of things that are both good and scary. But we have things like driverless vehicles that are, well, I have 100,000 rides per week. It's actually been updated to 150,000. the logistics and ins and outs of society are starting to have subtle shifts. So in these four cities where we have driverless vehicles, now, of course, I don't know if you saw the news, there was a gentleman where the Waymo car derailed and it just put him in a circle in the parking lot in the airport forever, and he couldn't get out of the car to get to his gate. But these ideas of rethinking how we do stuff, not just using ChatGPT to find answers, but logistics of navigation is becoming more and more. Toyota is building what's called the Woven City. This is already underway at the base of Mount Fiji, and it is all about mobility. I won't play this video. I'll make sure I don't think I have it linked in the learning doc, but I will. But they're bringing in, I think, 200 Toyota workers, and then you can apply for the other 200 spots as innovators. And so everything does have an AI lens through it, but rethinking how we innovate and how we live is pretty wild to think this seems sci-fi, but it's already here at the base of Mount Fiji, which is pretty crazy. Now, obviously, there has to be concerns with that as it's a company that's building this, right? So there's obviously some sort of need for financial gain, but nonetheless, things to think about. We've got stuff as I'm working with districts that, I mean, I worked with the district yesterday and they want everything blocked and banned. But what happens when our Chromebooks that we upscale every year start to have an AI button built in? And so lots of new Chromebooks and PCs have an AI button built right into the keyboard. And so how do we navigate that with AI within the hardware? We're not going to ban keyboards and things of that nature. And so what does this look like for us moving forward? How do we handle ethical issues? And there are a lot of ethical issues where it comes to academic integrity, but even bigger scale of the military having AI-enabled rifle robot dogs. And these are already out deployed. And so is this right? Is this wrong? What does this mean? Good, bad, indifferent. We've got to be able to be aware of some of these things so that we can have a voice at the table for what this stuff means for us moving forward. And I shared this back in October, and it's come a long way, and all the other companies have it. But we've got stuff now in tools that you can use readily. We can do this. You can dabble some of this in the next couple of days, where you give it a prompt and it can access your files in your computer, the internet, and it can do the work for you. In this case of this video, it fills out a vendor form. It searches databases, fills out the vendor form, and submits it onto the internet. And so these are things that are real, that already exist, and they're continuing to get better. So what does that mean for us? I know some of you teach online classes. I know that these prompts can fill out discussion forums for students. I could have all my comments, all my ideas in a forum and never actually technically log in myself as a human. What does this mean for instruction and teaching and learning? I don't have the answers, but we can't start to have conversation around it if we're not even aware that these things are already currently available. And so there's things to be exploring there. And then, there's AI that helps for diverse learners. And we all have our strengths and weaknesses when it comes to learning and what works for us. And there's all sorts of fantastic things. But on the fantastic side of it, right, there's also implications. And so Meta's Ray-Ban glasses that are available, there was a principal that just shared this week on LinkedIn. Well, not a principal, a science teacher. He was teaching a class. He was looking and he noticed a kid well, they just look like regular glasses, prescription lens and everything. And the glasses was doing all the science work for them. It was because it can talk to you and it can analyze what you're looking at. And you can kind of just like whisper to yourself. And so while there's some great benefits for those who are blind, hearing loss, language translation, there are things that are really, really profound. There's other implications to the system that, we already kind of work in. And what does this mean for us? And so as we get into this, I'm going to bypass this here a little bit for the sake of time. We need to start to think about, what does this mean? What's this look like? And let's get into it. So I want to start off with, I know it seems like a very simple question. And actually, I was just posed this. I'm on the state of Iowa's Department of Ed. We are crafting the AI guidance and policy for our state that'll eventually be approved. And then districts can leverage this work for their own policies. And we started with this question. And it's kind of interesting in the sense that we say AI all the time, but then when we really try to be like, okay, so define that, what does that mean? What is AI? And so I want to start here with this prompt. And what we're going to do is I'm going to break you out into breakout rooms. And some of you are already in rooms with large people, so you can just be your breakout room. Some of you are siloed here, and so you can kind of pop in and we can kind of navigate the groups here a little bit because I know there's a lot of people on this call. But what I have in the learning document is, and you don't have to use any of these, but just as some resources, there are some things under concept one that can help you kind of get started on thinking about what is AI. Obviously, you have your own devices. You might already have your own definitions. And what I would like in your groups is there are some slides here, and I've got 30 groups, and maybe I'll reshuffle this, rethink this here a little bit with how we've got stuff organized. And your breakout room number that you get assigned to, you will find in that number in this slide deck. And then I just want you guys to have a conversation and who you're with. You might have to introduce each other if you don't know who each other are, and then go for it. And then you should be able to edit this document and then be able to put your thoughts and ideas down. And I'm going to give you roughly 10 minutes and then bring you back. We're not going to do a whole group share out because there's so many people, but you'll be able to kind of scour and check out what other people are thinking and doing. But this is an opportunity for you just to kind of have a basic conversation on what is AI. So before I open breakout rooms, are there any questions at this point about this first little task here? Okay. So we'll try. We might have to adjust a few things. I'm just going to assign automatically 30 breakout rooms. And so some of you, if you're already in a room with people, we'll just move you around as we need to. We'll make sure everyone kind of has a thought partner to kind of work here with, and we'll get people where they need to be accordingly. And then I will send a message as a timer when we've got about 2 minutes left, but I'll give you about 10 minutes. So that'll bring us back at about 8:48. So a few minutes if you need to do introductions, kind of talk through it, throw some words onto your slide, and away we go. So I will open these rooms up now, and we'll see what you come up with. But hopefully you were able to get into just a little bit of dialogue around AI. Maybe it's just introducing and learning about other people that work within your faculty. And sometimes that's just as important as navigating AI. At the end of this, the human connection is what is important. And so in those slides, for the groups that are able to get to that and get some stuff shared, I appreciate it. And obviously, any of you can go back and kind of process through what other people have put together. I'll take a look at that here in the next session and see what you guys came up with. There are lots of definitions. We're not going to spend forever going in great detail about AI, but in some shape or form, this is relatively somewhat a version of a definition that you see oftentimes when it comes to AI of problem solving or decision making ability displayed by a man-made system that's normally associated with humans. And so that's typically what we see as we work through this. Something that I think is important, something that is kind of a sticking point for me as we talk AI is such a huge field, and not all elements of AI are things that people are concerned with. It's really a lot of this in the education space is more the generative AI, the subset where it's creating content, pulling from all these resources and mimicking people and students and adults claiming the work for their own. So not all AI necessarily is of concern to people. And so we're not going to go through and turn all of you into computer scientists, but it is important to be able to distinguish that where I think a lot of the concerns are is this domain down here that has really kind of exploded with ChatGPT 2 years ago. And so these were just some references. You had time to look at that in terms of thinking about AI. But what I want to do here next is I'm actually going to merge, for the sake of time, some prompting as we get into this. So what I want to do is get us into ChatGPT a little bit. A couple of things that I think are important, and I know that I'm preaching to the choir here. It's why you're here to learn. Is one, ChatGPT or any of the other large language models that are out there that do things similar to ChatGPT. It's not a replacement for engagement. It's not a replacement for human thought. And so I know we know that. The question is, so then what do we do about it when students and people then take it as that variability? And so how do we kind of work through that? Something that is important as you create your ChatGPT accounts, if you've never used it or you've used it very sparingly, and you don't want any of your prompts or any of the information that you put into ChatGPT to be used into their data sets. A couple things. One, this is really important. And I know most of you know this, but it's amazing how many people still put stuff in. Don't put anything personally identifiable into your prompts, into your spreadsheets, into the files, because that can potentially be used into the training data set. Same thing with student work or student privacy. I know we know that, but I know there have been several cases of schools I've worked with where teachers have put in students' assignments and had the AI grade it, but that assignment had the kid's first and last name, like on the file, things like that, that it's not intentional, but unintentionally putting students' privacy information into the systems because we just didn't think about it, we didn't know, and then they feel terrible afterwards. And the same thing with likeness. So I was working with an elementary, and a teacher was working on image creation and wanted to turn all her students into superheroes. And she was uploading this kid's school ID picture. Did not mean anything by it. And then once I was like, hey, that like now the data system has all these kids' pictures. And she felt ungodly, horrible, like sick to her stomach. It was not, she was excited to like have these kids come to school looking like their favorite superhero. And so sometimes we get into this, and it's not because we're trying to be malicious or give information away. We're exploring, we're tinkering, and then we're like, oh, wait a minute, maybe I shouldn't have done that. So just some things that I know are important for me to say. And there is a way in all of these platforms, not even just because of this information, but just stuff in general. If you don't want any of your prompts, any of your information to go into the training data set, there is a way within ChatGPT to turn this off, meaning that in your account, you can do your prompting, you can use ChatGPT or whatever tool you like, but it won't use that information to train the model. It'll keep it out. I would say the downside of that is then you don't have a history log of all your chats because it doesn't keep anything. So I like people to be aware that at least you have this right with privacy. And so if you are in your ChatGPT account and you go to your little profile icon and you go to settings, in settings, there's a tab in there called data controls. And it's this improve the model for everyone. And if you turn that off, it will not use your prompts information into its training data set. And you can turn that off and on as you would like. So there's times maybe you don't care, and there's times that maybe you do care. And so if it's like maybe it's your own information, it's your own rubric, and you don't want them to have access to that, just to be aware that you can control when you're, as they say, improve the model for everyone, which is using the data you put in. So just so you are aware, because I know this is a very important topic for a lot of people, that you have that right. So we're going to discover a little bit. My favorite quote from Papert that's been around forever. I use it in every session that I do, no matter what I'm talking about. The scandal of education. Every time you teach something, you deprive a child the pleasure and benefit of discovery. So I want you to have this feeling of discovery and kind of see what happens. I used to spend a lot of time on prompt engineering and things of that nature. I'm going to go through it quickly because it's not as important anymore because these models have adapted so fast. But ChatGPT, right before the holidays, had 12 days of shipments, where every day for 12 days, ChatGPT released a new feature. And so in the last month, things that you couldn't do in the free account, you can now do what people were paying $20 or $200 a month to be able to have access to. And so we're going to get into some of these because it's important that we realize that in these free accounts, what we're all able to do. And it's more than just putting in text prompts. So some of these things, in case you're not aware, in ChatGPT, it does now have a search browser like a Google Chrome, and you can search the internet and put in prompts and it will pull and analyze the internet just like you would with Chrome. It has that. That was not a feature in the free account before. It would not access the internet. It just used its training data set. It can analyze and extract insights from your data. What this means is it can start to learn about you, and it will start to then give responses more individually utilized to you. So the more you use it, the more it understands your style, your tone, who you are. It's not thinking, but it's processing the data and the way you're articulating and the things that you keep asking for. And so it has a memory where it will remember all the things and then start to curate responses back to you accordingly. So this is important. And also the way it can analyze and extract files. It would screenshot everything, and it would use like JSON. Now it can get into Python and different types of data analytics that you didn't have access to in the free account. You are able to do limited use of images. So there are a lot of AI image creation tools, but you now have access to DALL-E. I think I don't know how many, it's limited to like 3 or 5 a day. And there's just some of those features that are now in the free account that you didn't have 3 weeks ago. And so these are some things that are important. So some prompt engineering, if you've used it or not used it, be as clear as possible. Give it explicit instructions because it's not a mind reader. So the more explicit you are, the better response you're going to be. And don't be afraid to give it success criteria. It's what we do as teachers and educators and just anybody that works with people all the time. It's something as generic as this, right? If you were to ask your students or who you work with, does everyone understand the assignment? They're all going to be like, yeah. Right. But if you start to ask different phrasing, you can elicit different responses. It's the same thing with these models. And so I'm going to go through this quickly because if it's your kind of first time, you haven't done much, sometimes it's like, I'm not very impressed by what it can provide. So some things is introduce what it is that you want. What is it that you're after? A quiz, an email, a letter of recommendation, analysis of a spreadsheet, whatever that is, you have to kind of know what your purpose is going into it. And you're going to explain that to the AI model. Give it a role. I want you to act as a college faculty member. I want you to take on the role of a 10th grader. I want you to take on the role of a neuroscientist. Whatever it is that you're after, if you give it different roles, it will give different responses to your prompt. Explicit parameters kind of go one and the same. The more clear you are, I need 10 questions at DOK level 5. I need this in a bulleted list. I need this in Russian. I need this in a spreadsheet. Think about what you want the output to be. Otherwise, you're going to get a whole bunch of words. And then you're going to have to keep reprocessing. And it's conversation. So continue to ask it. You can go in there when you get a response, if you haven't used these much, and be like, I don't like the second bullet point. Give me another one, or redo the second paragraph. You can be very specific in terms of what you like and don't like. And so you can pinpoint very specific things, and it'll just keep recreating until you get to a point of something that you're like, oh, I can use this. I like this. And so as you get started here, and I want you to start playing around with ChatGPT and prompting, you might be like, for some people, I literally have no idea what to even put in as a prompt. So in the learning doc, I've given you some links of a whole bunch of prompts that you could copy and paste to start. You could also just do this very simple one and just straight up tell ChatGPT, I don't know how to use you. And it will guide you through some things to think about. So if you're not sure where to start, you can. Some of you have done this thousands and thousands of times. You probably use ChatGPT on the daily basis and quite a bit. So some of this for you, if you want, you can look ahead to the next session where we start to look at some of the advanced features because there's some pretty neat things that it can do. If you want to dive into that, if you're like, I've already got the prompting down, thanks, but no thanks, you can jump ahead because there's a bunch of new features that have kind of released here recently. And some of you are brand new, just getting into prompting. What I was going to do was give you some individual time and then give you time after that as a small group to have some conversation. What I think I'm going to do, just to get us back on track, is I'm going to put you into small groups now, and you can obviously work on your own, but you can also engage in conversation at the same time. And maybe some of you have some things to share. Maybe some of you just need to learn together, and you can just kind of experiment, talk through some stuff collectively. If you're in a group and you've all kind of prompted, something that I think is interesting, and this is something that we're trying to showcase, I know in students, at least in the high school levels, is like you guys could all put in the same prompt. And if you've used ChatGPT or these models enough, you will all get different responses as it starts to learn about you. And so it doesn't create the same thing over and over. You might see some similarities, but if you're in a group and you want to explore with that, try that out and just, if it's your first time using ChatGPT, it's not going to have much history on you. So you might get some more generic responses, but it is an interesting thing to kind of tinker around with, because we don't normally use ChatGPT with other people at the same time. And so I think come up with some sort of thing, or have people take the same topic and try a different verb. So different words adjust what's called the temperature, which is how much it starts to get creative or stay within the guidelines of a safe answer. So changing the phrasing or changing a verb will sometimes adjust how it responds. So I'm going to open up the breakout rooms. It should go a lot smoother because I'm just going to use the same rooms we just were in. So that should get you there quicker. And then we're going to go about 15 minutes to give you time to prompt, to kind of talk through it, maybe try this activity, and just have some conversation with some other folks that you're with, and then we'll bring you back. I was going to have you do some stuff on a slide deck, but let's not worry about that. Let's just get in there and play and tinker and not worry about trying to capture it on the group slide deck. I just want you to engage in the prompts. And so there is under concept 2, I've put together here, there are a bunch of libraries of prompts. If you've not used them, I've put some other ones that are not necessarily education based, but you can kind of tinker around and see what it does. And then concept 3 is just some ideas I put together for if you want to just have some other conversations in a small group. Any questions or thoughts or concerns at this point? I gotta double check the chat here. Sorry, I'm trying to make sure I'm not missing anything. Before I open up, I see, yes, we'll put the one room into a group by himself.
That's that group out at the Belong Technology Center that's all in the same room together.
Yep. So I'm going to open up the rooms and then I'll pull them out into a separate room. But it might put them in with another person just for the time being, but then I'll get that fixed. Okay, so I will open up these rooms here, give you 15 minutes to tinker and talk and kind of navigate through this, and then we'll bring people back and see what we got. Okay, so hopefully there was some good discovery and conversation. I know we didn't have people put stuff in slides, but if there was something that was interesting or fascinating within your group, if you want to throw that into the chat, at least the other groups can hear in a second. If some of you want to come off mute and share a little bit what you discussed, you can. I do want to address, there was 2 questions in the chat as we broke into breakout rooms, and they're both really good questions. And so I want to make sure that I do address those here. One of the questions, it was in regards to if you didn't create a ChatGPT account and you just go to the website and you can use kind of just like the basic features, does that data get collected? And the answer is yes. So if you're just using that free account without an account, you didn't sign up for it, but if you just go to the browser and you can do some basic text prompting there, ChatGPT will store your prompts and store the outputs. What it's doing, obviously, it's not linking it to you individually, but it will use that information for further training. So that is a fantastic question for that. So even though you're anonymous, it will still kind of use that information. The other one was, I know there were some concerns that some of you weren't able to create an account because there's too many signups from the internet provider or the IP. This happens when a lot of people who are on the same Wi-Fi, it kind of treats it like a spam bot. So you can do a couple things. If you have like a hotspot, you could do that, or you can create an account on your phone and then log in onto your work device with that account information. But you just have to get off the Wi-Fi to create that account because it's just treating it like in this call, 100 plus people are, 50 of you are trying to bombard it and creating an account. It's going, something's up here. So that would be that flag as well. And so those were 2 things there that I wanted to address. Yeah. So, Chris, great. Thanks for sharing. And also the idea there about citations and works cited abilities, it has improved. And it's improved because it's accessing the internet. So it's doing a little bit better job at that. I would say Chat has gotten better. We will look at some of the other large language models tomorrow. It's still, I believe, and I can't prove this with research, it's my own anecdotal work, it still doesn't come close to Perplexity. So Perplexity is another large language model that I feel like its work citation is still one of the best. It's not perfect, but ChatGPT knows it. ChatGPT this week has opened and announced an education division. So something to be aware of. And they obviously know that that's an important feature moving forward. As you guys were talking before I move into the next section here, is there anybody want to share thoughts or anything? I know we could probably get caught in this forever, but I also know it's important because there might have been some interesting thoughts. Anybody want to come off mute and share anything? And if not, we can move on. I don't want to like force it, but I also want to make sure there's a chance here because there is a lot of knowledgeable people in this call.
I will. I'll say something.
Sure, thank you.
And then it'll just be brief. I am one of those types of people that I fear what I don't understand. And technology is one of the things that I do not understand. And so I'm always afraid I'm going to mess something up or click on the wrong thing or, things like that. And so I was fearful of this, and I'm still fearful of it a little bit. But what I did do in the breakout room was we just tried one of the basic non-account type things like make a plan. And so I put something into it and it made a plan. And so I do feel like at maybe a very simple level, I can use this for something in my classroom to help guide me with a project for my students or something without getting too in depth and then getting myself in the weeds and not being able to get out. So it was helpful. It was helpful.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. And we didn't get into a whole lot of different prompting techniques. I can link into the learning doc because of course you want to get one more link in that big old document. But there's things that you can do called 0-shot prompting, 1-shot or few prompt. And what that means is you can train ChatGPT, like you could load in a rubric, for example. Say you have a certain structure of how you assess in your class, and you use a standard kind of a rubric feature that you use no matter what the projects might be. You could load those in and be like, I want you to help me create an assessment, another rubric in this exact format, but for this standard or for this topic. And you can train it to give the exact output of what you're looking for. And so there are some things that way that can be really helpful. We'll get into this also tomorrow and also on Friday. But the idea of I could put in one of my assignment prompts or projects or topics, I could put in the rubric and I could have it create examples at all the different grading levels. Here's what an F paper will look like, a D paper, a C paper, not necessarily grade that way. And then you could have these examples to then bring to the classroom and engage kids in a conversation on critiquing the AI's output at those levels and being like, what is good about this? What isn't good about this? What did the AI do? What do we like? And now you can kind of get into more domain specific conversations in our classrooms, which I think sometimes we forget that maybe the kids don't have those skills. Obviously, I don't know any of you, so I'm not saying that that's what you're doing, but just being more intentional, like here's what we're going. Here's what AI came up with. What do we think? What do we like? What do we not like? So just some great other ideas that kind of pop up. Stephanie, you raise your hand. Go ahead.
Yep. Hi there. I teach English and specifically Comp 1, Comp 2, and Intro to Lit. And so in Comp 1, when I do research, they have to write their own citations. They have to actually write them out. I prefer them to do them by hand and then type them, but I can't control that, because they need to know the parts of the citation. They need to know what it is that they're putting together so that they can do it correctly. And I feel like this is going to end up being a way where it makes it virtually impossible for me to teach that skill in that particular way anymore, because they're going to go straight to a generator, and those generators are going to get better and better, and they're going to lose sight of why they're doing a citation and what a citation is comprised of. I mean, it's almost like it's a kind of a sentence in and of itself. And so that's the kind of thing that I worry about, that we're getting way ahead of ourselves and students are just going to use it as yet one more, shortcut. I don't have to learn what a citation is when I can just have it generated for me. So that's a concern that I have about this.
Yeah, a very valid concern. Something that we could think about, and I'm just off the top of my head here, not that this is necessarily going to be the answer, but as you're working on having students work those citations out by hand and having that conversation on why it's important, maybe the next step could be, once that they've done it by hand, once that they have understood the process and the rhyme and reason behind it, then is there a way where then the next step, maybe AI is allowed, where almost like I did with that book at the beginning of the session, where I could take a picture of my handwriting stuff and have AI then put that into the the document itself properly cited, or they'd have to double check to make sure it could read the writing. And maybe there's ways in which you can help students start to understand ways in which we need to be critical about AI. Not critical in the sense that AI is bad, but critical in knowing that it's not the authority of all the things and it's not right for much of the time. And so how do we kind of leverage them being critical, also learning it, but then also learning the foundations of why we're doing stuff. So it's, yeah, just so many things to consider as we kind of navigate this landscape as it continues to change and evolve. So continue to feel free to throw some stuff there in the chat as we go. I want to get us into this next little part because it might springboard some thoughts. So let me get this shared here. So what I want to do is just another little section of, I've kind of got two pathways for you to explore, and it's going to be kind of what you want to make of this particular learning. And again, this whole entire stuff this morning is just to give you a baseline of what these tools can do. We're showcasing ChatGPT. Tomorrow, we'll spend a small chunk of time exploring the others. Just know that all these companies, when one of them comes up with a feature, they all copy each other because it's a $1 trillion industry. And so if you're like, hey, I don't like ChatGPT, I like Perplexity, or I like Claude, or I like Microsoft Copilot, they all just cycle. Like everyone's trying to come up with the one new thing to catch the waves, and then the rest will go, oh, that's really good, we're going to embed this. So a lot of what I'm sharing, these other platforms do very similar. And then tomorrow you'll start to be like, ooh, I like this platform, it does this better than the other one. And so then you're going to start to kind of see some different nuances, because even though they kind of operate the same, they do have some different features, and they all have their own data sets. And there are a couple different nuances for us to kind of explore. But with ChatGPT, a couple things that you can do if you have an account, and maybe you've already started to dabble in this in these prior sessions, but in case you haven't, because you're just learning prompting maybe for the first time and putting in words and seeing what comes out, in your feature or in your little message box as you are prompting, you've got these little icons down here. And so one of them is you can attach files. This is what I was talking about earlier. I could put in a PDF of my rubric. I could put in, my son, who's a college student, will sometimes put like study guides and things in and help. Like he was taking a organic bio class, and he's like, I want to learn. I do not understand at all what is happening. So he was leveraging some of the resources and having it rewrite at like a 10th grade level, not for cheating. He really did want to learn, but there were ways in which he could leverage this. I'm not saying he's some saint, he's not, but there's things that we could do, and there's things that maybe you could do professionally within some of the resources that you have created, that you might be able to develop some other things. So you can attach files and then give it a prompt to do stuff with those files, or use it as a reference, or use it as a guide as you're creating whatever it is that you're asking for. The little package box. Now, some of you will have these features, some of you won't. Sometimes they kind of roll out in different stages and times and days. And so if you don't have all of these things, just give it time. ChatGPT is kind of weird how it rolls out stuff to the different people, especially on the free accounts. And I know it's a little hard to read down here, but when you click that box, and you have this on your device, you will have potentially on the free account 4 different options. One is to create images. And so if you haven't done that and you're curious, you see them all over the place, you could prompt just like you could to create different images or graphics if you have presentations or different things you want that way. The search is just as you can imagine. It is like Google Chrome. ChatGPT has its own search browser because they're going after Google. And so you can search specifically the web with that. So you could hit that feature, it'll search the web and not its data source, not its large language model of its billions of bits of data. There's the reason, which we don't necessarily need to get into too much today, but they are moving ChatGPT, and of course they're going to hype because they need attention, but they are moving to AGI, artificial generated intelligence. So beyond what we're doing here today, where it will start to do stuff on its own. So the feature that I talked about last night, I got access to it. It's called Task. And so I can give it a prompt and it will run whenever I tell it to. So I have it coordinated for 8 a.m. tomorrow. I gave it a prompt to give me a bulleted list of all the new features of every platform. It will run automatically without me prompting it as a human. I can set a task, or I could have it go through my email or whatever I need it to do. And so that reasoning is just this next level of thought where it's not just doing algorithms, but trying to mimic the idea of thinking. The free version is 01. ChatGPT, the paid version, is already up to 03. And so it's moving fast. But the one that will probably be of most interest to a lot of you will be the Canvas. So with Canvas, you prompt it the way you have been if you've been doing it this morning. But in Canvas, if you're into programming, it is crazy what it can program. But even in writing, you can go in and highlight a sentence and then give it a individual prompt to fix just that one little tiny thing. And you can really start to fine tune in a very, very detailed, nuanced way the work that you're interacting with ChatGPT with. And so those are some features there that are new into the free account that didn't exist a couple weeks ago. And this does change, what kids and what people can do, because now I don't have to pay the $20 a month to be able to do some of these things. And so what does this mean, in the workflows and stuff that we do? And this can be it doesn't always have to be in a professional setting. I mean, there are things where I've taken a picture, I joke with people, I've taken a picture of my fridge, the inside of my fridge. And I was like, I need a recipe idea. And it can analyze like the food in my fridge and put together recipes. I don't know that I necessarily want ChatGPT to know everything in my fridge all the time, but I know we get so laser focused on the professional side. There are some interesting things too. Or, I have 3 children at these ages and it's 15 degrees and it's cold. And what can I do to entertain them for my own sanity? And you can start to do different things like that. There's stuff within the personal lives, again, being careful what you put in there, but as we kind of navigate that. So those are some things. So what I have it'll be our last little breakout group here for about 15, 20 minutes, and then we'll come back and kind of bring things to a close. But kind of 2 things. One, in the learning doc, I've put links if you want to see some videos or demos of these features. The one I didn't talk about was they do have a 1-800 number now, which is pretty interesting because now the accessibility for everybody. I'm thinking of like elderly, like my grandmother who's 94. I mean, I'm not saying I'm going to tell her to use this, but she could call and get help. Like she wouldn't need to have a smartphone and have an app or a computer and know how to type all this in. She could literally just call, and so this accessibility thing is interesting. I don't know what to make of it all, but just something to be aware of. And so if you want to some of you are just really eager to learn about the new things. And so those things are there. But we also want to get into what does this mean for teaching and learning? And so I've segued a couple little things in here for a while that we're going to dive into in greater detail tomorrow and Friday for sure. But I've put some things for you to kind of think about if you either want to have conversation or test things out. Or I've put in this piece that a gentleman named Mark Marino posted just, I think, yesterday or this morning, where he went through and took his entire coursework and had ChatGPT do every single assignment and then had a conversation with his kids saying, here's what AI came up with. If you create the same output, it's a D. You're going to have to do better than this if this is what AI can do. I'm not saying it's a good idea, but it's an interesting thought piece for you to kind of maybe think about as you're exploring AI and what it means for you and the work that you're doing. So I'm going to open the breakout rooms for the last time, about 15 minutes, and you can kind of dabble in either level because I know we've got people in different spaces of interest. And then we'll come back, grab some final thoughts, and then get us set up for tomorrow when we'll get really more into thinking about these in a greater detail of the academic lens and things to think about. So I'm going to open up these rooms, and if there's any questions or anything, throw those in the chat, and I will get hopefully some good conversation. And a lot of this today is just to get you connected and talking through it and hearing other perspectives. So hopefully you've found some valuable insight here, being a chance just to connect with some people within your faculty, maybe people you work with or not always work with. And so we've got about 15 minutes. And so we're not going to do another break. I think we've exhausted that flow there enough. And just, I want to make sure that at least I touch upon this because I think it's an interesting piece too, as we think about the learning and the teaching and instruction and how we're processing information. And again, cautious optimism with all of it. But a lot of these platforms have voice mode, which doesn't seem all that like, ooh, amazing, but it does incredible things. For some students who have a hard time, the actual tangible, sorry about that, the actual tangible concept of writing by hand and doing some of that, those fine motor skills, the idea to get their ideas out from their voice onto a document or have it transcribed is huge. The idea of being able to speak in your native language and have it transcribed into English or vice versa is huge. The idea, I use voice mode quite a bit as I navigate and drive between schools and things of that nature, where I can go and kind of word vomit my thoughts and ideas. And I have certain prompts that I could utilize to have ChatGPT organize those thoughts so that when I get to my computer or device, they're ready to be deployed out and utilized. And I can start to leverage some of this. It's an important piece, because as so much in education, we're still learning how to do text prompting. Society and the companies are moving into voice. It's so much easier. I don't have to actually spend time typing. I can just say what I need to and have it done that way. And the next step, and I've put these links in the learning doc, I would encourage you, if you like it or want it, to try the voice. Put it on your phone or on the website. There is a feature in that search browser on the right-hand bottom right corner of your output. There, you can activate voice mode and do the talking. I think it's really important that we experience this because you can choose the voices. There are different voices, there are different personalities, and ChatGPT recently updated with this advanced voice mode. What this means is if I'm more serious in my tone, the quote unquote personalities, they're not personalities, but the algorithm will adjust to my tone to match me. If I'm being a little more funny or lighthearted, it will adjust and match me to my emotional level or the word choice that I'm using. It will respond in cadence to how you are interacting with it. This is important as we're starting to see a huge increase in our youth going to these types of platforms, character AI, other places, as a sounding board for their thoughts and ideas, and not going to humans, not going to a therapist, not going to a counselor if they don't have access to it or not. And this is an interesting piece of what does this look like? What's this mean for us? The other thing is thinking about how we process information, and talking to these large language models feels different than typing. And so having that experience, I think, is an important thing if you haven't done it, to try it and just see what you like. Or if you don't trust ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot has this exact same thing. If
then I get caught or something later.
And so the other thing that has come out, it's not in the free account, so I won't spend a lot of time on it, but at some point, all these paid features become free, is it now has video mode, where I can turn on my camera, I can show it what I'm doing, and it can analyze in real time my video and talk me through. And so ChatGPT has I put the video demo in there, I believe, where it shows them how to do like a pour over coffee, and it tells them like how to do it in the circular motion, or he was doing it too narrow, or he wasn't waiting long enough. And so I don't know that I want to show my home and stuff to ChatGPT, but this idea of video and real time feedback, that I don't even have to, I can talk and it can visually see what I'm seeing, is an interesting space. So just things to be aware of if you haven't been aware of it, because as we're trying to figure out what kids are doing for prompting, the tools are continuing to unfold into more and more levels of video, audio, things of that nature. So we've got 10 minutes left. What I want to do is just set you up for tomorrow and then get other thoughts and questions you have so we can adapt in real time to make sure this learning is as relevant to as we can. Tomorrow, we're going to start with a guest presenter and some conversation. He's got some really interesting things that he's going to share. I think it's going to be pretty thought-provoking and lead to some interesting conversation, to say the least. We're then going to spend a little bit of time looking at the AI platforms, not as much as we did today, but I think just being aware of what the other models do and don't do that are similar to ChatGPT, and then starting to give you some time in your departments thinking about some of this work before we get into literacy, academic integrity, teaching and learning, what this looks like, what people are doing in the classroom. Our visitor on Friday, then we'll talk a little bit about some stuff that she's seeing at the higher ed levels in the work that she does across the country and also Iowa State. And so it'll give us some leverage there. But what I want to end here with in these last few minutes is giving you a chance in the chat to put in thoughts, questions, ideas, things you want to learn, and I will curate all that. And any of this stuff we can either be more intentional to highlight or make sure that I infuse within this learning document. Today was really just kind of designed to be a level set. If you haven't leveraged and used some of these tools, or at least been able to even just have a conversation with other people while you're using the tools, I think that right there is really powerful in and of itself. But I want to make sure that, we get a chance for you to share the ideas and things that you have. And then I'll do my best with both guests and the work that I have planned to make sure that I highlight and bring those other ideas as much as I can into the time together. And if not, at least provide resources into the learning doc to help the ideas that you have. So if we could take a few minutes there, just throw those things in the chat, either for everyone or if you want a private message, whatever, just so I'll get a copy of that and I will process that here tonight before tomorrow. And that's really, I think, the wrap for today. I think you've had plenty of AI content for 2 hours here this morning. So I'll give you this time here to throw those comments in, and then Jeremy, I'll throw it back to you quick. I don't know if there's any other final thoughts from your end, and then we'll call it a show.
Yeah, I appreciate your time, Aaron. Thanks for kind of guiding us in that. We had some great conversation in just the breakout group number 11. There had a few folks in there who were new users to pretty advanced users, and I'm already thinking maybe during fall startup I need some of my faculty to present some of the things that they're doing and how they're using it to be more effective in the classroom. Also got to get some great opportunities to see some aha moments on people who are like, wow, I had no idea kind of what was at my fingertips. But we're still, the prompting is interesting. I always say kind of dumb in, you get dumb out. So we need to be very thoughtful and smart on what we're inputting there in order to get a good product out on the backside. And it really truly is a tool. It's not going to take away from the things that we need to continue to do. I think one of my favorite stories that I heard at the ICCOC conference last year was that the manufacturing skilled trades division was using it for English language learners, and they were taking the very technical things that they were learning in the classroom, incorporating it into ChatGPT, having it translate into their native language at a reading level and an understanding that they could connect the dots. And they watched essentially learning and test scores and everything else go through the roof, because the barrier wasn't their ability to learn. The barrier was the language and how you're to translate to very technical skills. And I thought, wow, imagine if we could do that in a number of different areas, and again, truly use it as a tool for engaging and improving student learning outcomes. I thought that would be outstanding.
Absolutely.
Thanks for that. Please, in the chat, if you have things that you'd like Aaron to maybe address or an example you'd like to see, I'm sure he would be interested in hearing some of your feedback as well. And thanks everybody for your time. Have a great rest of the day. You're welcome to stay on as long as needed. I'm sure Aaron will hang on for a little while to answer a few questions that anybody may have individually for him. So we'll see you back again tomorrow for part 2 of the AI series.